My Gavanen Melanine, and well met indeed. I am Archegaladirthan, the head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to another Divide and Conquer faction overview, updated for version 1.2. And today is the Northern Dúnedain, as many of you will see, as I'm doing these in the order that I originally did them all the way back about a year ago with version 0.5. So, the Northern Dúnedain. First things first, before we talk about the Northern Dune, I just want to cover something related sort of to Gondor and kind of about 1.2. But if you're playing this in, I don't know, even in a week's time, you'll already have these in your game anyway. But I just want to show you, and that is the Elite Dwarfs' new campaign strategy models for Gondor. So, there is a new Gondorian Motte and Bailey. And if we move over to Methras, there is a new Gondorian Stronghold. If you're wondering why, that's because the castle line is now Motte and Bailey, Stronghold, Castle. Those are the three names. Because a lot of factions who had a wooden castle didn't actually have a wooden castle. It was a stone castle. So the name didn't fit. So I called them all Strongholds. But anyway, there's a Stronghold, the second level of a castle. And there is a Fortress, which is a unique level of the castle, which is only present in 3 locations. Dol Amroth, Caer Andros, and all the way up here in Fornost Arain. So there's those, and then there's some town models for you. So if we go over to Erek, there's a new Gondorian village. Just looks a little bit more organised, a little less white, it's less in your face. There's Kalembel and Ethring, they're both towns. And if we move over to Pelagia, you'll see that that is a city. Quite substantially larger. There's a noticeable difference between a town and a city, as you can see with Karasast and Pelagia. Ostithil over there is a stronghold as well. But there aren't any castles pre-built in the Gondorian style, I'm afraid, so I can't show you any of those. But anyway, so Gondor's got that. And there, just above Minas Tirith and on the hill over there, Ramundine, are the new beacons of Gondor, which litter the mountainside. And don't actually give you any advantage, but they are just a nice little addition, and we had one free resource. Additionally, I think you've already shown you the Northmen towns, but there's a new look of the Northmen large town. As you can see, there are buildings outside the walls, and it just looks a little bit more Middle-earthy, a little bit more Rohirrim, really, Rohirric. Edoras has been touched up by the Elite Dwarf as well, if you pardon the sexual pun, and it's got roofs that now match the Golden Hall, and it just looks a bit better. But the towns have also been redone. The town is most like what it used to look like, though, so very little changed there. But it does look cool. Now, additionally as well, now this is a work in progress and hasn't been finished just yet, but the new Northern Dúnedain city and large city models look very much like that. So that is a new Northern Dúnedain large city. So when you upgrade your cities, they will look like that. And to show you that off, actually, I can show you Fenestrian in upgrading. I'll do that at the end of the campaign section, so we don't dig into it too much. So, Northern Dúnedain, one of the game's originally hardest factions, very much debatable now. Now, I've written down a lot of things that many of you have asked me to talk about, and so there's a load of extra bits and pieces for these going forward now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the size of your domain at the beginning and the initial army you start with. As you can see from the map, the Northern Dúnedain have pretty much nothing. Their size of their domain is 2 provinces. 2 measly provinces, if you will. Amun Sul, which is a village, and Fenestrianin, which is also a village. That is all the towns that you begin with. Now, in terms of initial army, though, they're not doing too poorly, given those small, humble beginnings. Fenestrianin itself has Aragorn, and a couple of units of Dúnedain, which is quite useful. It gives you... Aragorn is a very good, unique general, so it's useful to have him. Over in Amun Sul, you get Arafor and another unit of Dúnedain Rangers, which will help you out and stand you in good stead. And away to the south, protecting the borders of the Shire from the fort across the Sarn Ford, is Halbrand.
Yes, my lord.
Now, of course, Halbrand isn't actually in the fort. A unique Dúnedain General for Bree is, but Halbrand resides just outside of the fort there. Now, if you're wondering why I just ended turn, it's because I forgot to do that at the beginning, because as somebody suggested, if I end the turn, I can show you all where all of the turn 1 auto expansions are, so you can see what you can actually invade. So down in Gondor, we know that Khand take Imlad Khanan at turn 1, so it doesn't change the overview video, but it just gives a bit more information. In future ones, I will have already ended turn once, so I just forgot to do it. So, your army is very much centred around the southern regions of Eriador, with a focus towards either Dunland or holding in a sort of Amun Sul kind of area. Oh, there's a new Northern Dúnedain stronghold, by the way, second tier of castle. Now, I say they're a work in progress because Elite Dwarf is going to shrink them down a bit, so they don't stand out as much, but I do quite like them. So, on to the next topic. Who's your leader, where's your capital, and which unique bodyguards have you got? Well, for the Northern Dúnedain, your leader is in your capital of Dúnedain. Now, Dúnedain used to be a town or a large town. I've since made it a village. So the model now matches better the actual battle map. And if you fight there, you'll be surprised at the battle map that I chose. However, it does start with 972 population, or about 950, I think, because obviously we've had a turn pass. So it can upgrade really quickly, and I mean really quickly. It will not take it long on low tax rate to get to the 1,200 it requires. But it starts as a village, so be wary of that. However, you do have a strong infrastructure built already, because I didn't touch any of the buildings, I just made it a village. Yes, but Chieftain Aragorn is your faction leader, and he has a unique unit of Grey Company. Now, they are totally unique. You can't train them at all. They are his bodyguard unit and his alone. And they're a remarkably effective cavalry archer unit. So, using them wisely, you can bring about some insanely heroic victories, like outrageous kill-death ratios Aragorn can get. So, a very vital tool for the Northern Dúnedain. Other unique generals, I don't think Arafor is, but I think Halbarad is. No, Arafor has your standard bodyguard, so that's the standard Dúnedain bodyguard. We'll look at those more in the second half of the video. But Halbarad of the North, your commander over here, he comes at you with Dúnedain Steel Bowmen. Now, the Steel Bowmen come in very, very late into the game. They're after the barracks event, and they're only available in certain locations. They are one of the only differences on the unit side from the previous overview video, which you can see, you can get a link to at the end of this video or in the description. And yeah, they're the only new unit since that older video. So Halbarad starts off with Steel Bowmen, which is very, very cool. And those are your armies. Oh, sorry, I forgot Hervigel. Ah, I knew I'd forget someone. To the north, sorry, to the far north, so back to topic 1, you've got your army in Fenestrian and you've got your army in Amunsul, Halbarad guarding Sarnford, and to the far north, allowing you to strike out at either Fornost or Anuminas, is Hervigil with a small army. Now, most of his army is currently free garrison, so you're not affected too much monetarily, and it's up to you which one you think is going to be better. Fornost can train more military troops and Anuminas gets more money, so the choice is yours. Of course, you can even go for Bari Donionach or Barketa, or even push out for Angmar straight away at Athelin. The choice is yours. But Hervigil is just there in the fort in the north. But do remember that the Dúnedain will of course start costing money if you bring them out of the fort. But the Dúnedain themselves, so the units that have the prefix Dúnedain, or the whatever that is, object Dúnedain, I'm not really sure, they have a very low upkeep, whereas the local units have quite a high upkeep. The Northern Dúnedain kind of follow the pattern whereby the more elite the unit is in the early game, the cheaper it is to have in each turn. And then when the barracks event comes, it swaps back around. So the more elite the unit becomes, the more upkeep it costs. But in the pre-barracks event, so before the barracks event, the Dúnedain's better units are actually their cheaper units in the long run. So that's something to look out for as well. And the final thing is, where does your diplomat come from? Well, the Northern Dúnedain are the only nation in the entire game who don't train their diplomat from their capital city. Instead, it comes from the watchtower of Amunsul. And there's your diplomat just there. You can train him from Amunsul. Amunsul, of course, is a village, but we'll cover that in a moment when I get onto economy and buildings. So, next up then, Rebel expansion. Well, as you can see from the map, you can go anywhere you want. Absolutely anywhere. Every single location is available to you. Hervigil can go north, east, west. The only place you can't go is, of course, Bree, as you can see, as I say, from the map, where they hold the Shire and they hold Bree itself. There's the new unique Bree model as well, if you're interested. The Bree towns aren't actually done yet. I'm waiting on those from Elite, so the day I record this, but then the day I record this, hopefully 1.2 is going out, either already went out yesterday or has come out today, so either way, they should be with us by then. But that's by the by. To the south, you can also go with Halbarad and try and beat the Dunlendings to Matraith, Kelionak, or Argond. Keloniac, sorry. Because, of course, the Dunlendings already have both Tharbads. They're ready to cross the river. You can also press yourself and head east and try and beat the Misty Mountains to both Camath Bryn and Anon and Arod. But the Misty Mountains will go for Anon and Arod quite heartily. That's a key favourite of theirs. So they're keen on that. The Camath Bryn flies very much under the radar. I don't know if it's because of the map or the terrain, the number of impassable trees in this region. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, this town is almost always left alone. So many games I've seen no one take Camath Bryn. I don't know what it is, so it's very, very free. But if you take it, rest assured the Misty Mountains will then take fault and will try to come and get it. So that's your expansion options. You can go anywhere you want as the Northern Dúnedain, which is very, very freeing. Now, onto your neighbours and diplomacy. Well, of course, Breland start to your west and you're allied to those. The Misty Mountains away to your east are an enemy, Angmar to the north are an enemy, and the Misty Mountains, Dunland to the south are an enemy. Those are your 3 enemies. Although at the game's start, you're not actually at war with Dunland. But it's very advisable to try and at least cut them out and take Keloniac, Matraith or Argond. Matraith is normally the best one to go for because it starts as a large town, which is quite a large level in the early game. So you can get a lot of money and troops from Matraith, so it's worthwhile. Also, Halbarad is within a day's march of it, so easy to get to. But in terms of alliances, you start only with Imladris and Bree. So you are not allied to the Elves of Linden over here with their new cities, courtesy of the Elite Dwarf as well, with the stone walls. And you're not allied to the Dwarves of Ered Luin. But it is obviously, again, very advisable to ally with both, for they will help you in your struggles against Angmar, and then should it come about, Ened Wyth as well. So those are your neighbours, enemies, and allies. So, onto your economy then, and your building restrictions and whatnot. Well, the economy for the Northern Dúnedain is a bit up and down, because, as I say, their better units are actually quite cheap upkeep. It's quite easy to make money. The only downside, though, is that Eriador has been ravished and ruined and destroyed, as many of you will have seen from my Angmar playthroughs, and this whole northern region is undeveloped either villages or lowly towns. Morvatarth, Nokfaraklaw, Athelin, and Gobadrine are all villages. So, not really too much money to be had there, but on the flip side, Enumenas and Fornost are both massive money makers if you can get hold of them. Their population size can grow very large, earning good money, and they start off as large as a fortress, the largest castle size available to anyone, and as a large city, the largest city size available to anyone. So they have the potential to build the best buildings. So economy-wise, getting hold of one of those 2 is always advisable. Other than that, though, Fenestruinen doesn't make too much money because of its poor positioning, really. And Amun Sul cannot upgrade beyond a village. You can't rebuild Amun Sul. Now, I know many of you have said that you want to, and a side note about modding is that it can't upgrade without losing its unique battle map. And it's such an iconic battle map that we just don't want that. So it has to remain as it is, I'm afraid. So it stays as a village. And it stays as a village throughout the whole game. You cannot upgrade it. Now, you can try and cheat your way to your population, you grow your population, but whatever you do, it just will never give you the option to upgrade it. So Amun Sul isn't a very good moneymaker, but it does train some of your best troops in the early game and in the late game. The watchtower itself, I believe, or possibly from the Dúnedain encampment here, it trains some of your best units. It's a good training centre in the early game, but it doesn't make very much money. So economy-wise, your best bet is always to try and take Enumenas and Fornost and secure those for economical purposes. Taking Matraith is very, very useful for that same reason. But other than that, the Northern Dúnedain don't actually get any building restrictions, so it's quite easy to make money. You're a Dúnedain descendant nation, so you can get large city and you can get castle, the 2 highest tiers of the castle and the town line. There's no restrictions otherwise anywhere else. You can get all the levels of ports and things like that, for example. So it's easy to make money. It can just be a bit of a challenge with trying to build an army big enough to counter the enemy. And we'll cover that again in a moment. Oh, no, we can cover that in this section. The Northern Dúnedain... Oh, no, we'll cover it in the script, sorry. Which is the next section. So on to the scripts. What scripts affect the Northern Dúnedain? Well, the first and foremost is the Aragorn RPG. And this is a simple kind of point-and-click adventure. It will pop up with messages every now and then asking you to send Aragorn to various locations, hunting down various things. It's the only real nod to the actual story in the mod. So Aragorn has to find Gollum, and then he has to help Frodo, I think, and then he does this, that, and the other. And it ends with him going all the way down to Dunharrow. And when he goes to Dunharrow, he then gets the Army of the Dead. Now, the Army of the Dead are very, very unique in that you get, I think, 3 battalions of them. They are basically unkillable. They just cannot die. The only unit, I think, that actually does kill them is the Balrog, possibly. And even he takes an age to kill even one of them. And they're 3 battalions of like 120 men each. They're totally invincible, as I say. Their defense stats are like off the charts, and they've got about 1 million hit points. So they just can't die. But after each battalion has fought in 3 battles, they then leave the game. So you have to use them wisely. Now, the best way of doing that is, of course, splitting them up and fighting in 3 separate battles, so essentially you get 9 battles worth of the Army of the Dead. But it's worth noting that the Army of the Dead is so powerful that a single battalion of them can easily take down a full 20 battalion strong banner army on their own. But they can only fight 3 times, so you have to choose wisely. Now the other script that affects the Northern Dúnedain, it's not really a script, it's just kind of their gameplay. And it's something that we call the Beacon of Hope recruitment system. Now this is because it is said that Aragorn is really the only hope for the free peoples in the Third Age. Of course, Frodo destroying the ring is the main hope, but they also need a leader to rally behind, and Aragorn is kind of selected by the powers that be to be that hero. And in the film, obviously, he doesn't decide to be king until like the 3rd film, but in the book, he always is going to be the king. From the moment you meet him in Bree, he's already decided he's going to be the king. So we focus on that, and what the Northern Dúnedain can therefore do is their recruitment is very restricted. In your Heartland region, so in Eriador, where the old Arnorian border used to be, you can train all of the Dúnedain units. There's then further restrictions that certain units only come from Arthedain, which is Barketta, Anuminas and Fornost. I think Bari Donionak as well. But Arthedain, there are 3 unique units for Arthedain. Additionally, there are 3 unique units that only come from Cardolan, which is pretty much everything north of the Gwathlo from Argond all the way up to about Amunsul. And finally, of course, the Northern Dúnedain can also recruit the men of Ruadour, who come from Camath-Bryn, Dol-Bryn, Morvatarth and Nochfar-a-Claw. And so there's this interesting restriction on your recruitment. So the bulk of your units only come from Eriador. And outside of Eriador, you only get the units that we saw in the Hervigil army, the local archers and local militia. And when you go past the barracks event, they are expanded to 5 local units. There's local captains or militia captains, militia captain archers or something. I can't remember what I called them. But there's a cavalry unit, an archer, and possibly a swordman, or is it just a cavalry unit and an archer? I think it might just be the cavalry and the archer. But anyway, you can only get a roster of 4 or 5 units that you can train absolutely anywhere. So you have to rely on those. But this is where the beacon comes in. Every single human nation in the game, except for Rune, allows you to train their units if you hold their areas. So if the Northern Dúnedain, for example, take down Dunland and take down Enedwaith, they can then recruit men of Enedwaith and men of Dunland in those regions. And this expands to Gondor, Dol Amroth, Rohan, Anduin, Imladris, Dale, Dorwinion, Harad and Umbar. All of those factions allow you to train their units if you are in their regions. And it comes from the idea that Aragorn is such a beacon of hope that he rallies the defenders of those regions and the peoples of those regions to fight for the free peoples. So the Northern Dúnedain are kind of like the ultimate challenger to Sauron, which is reflected in their win conditions, because to win you have to defeat Mordor, Isengard and Angmar. You also have to hold 50 regions, and of course with the new victory conditions I put in with each faction, that just means holding the capitals of the regions you need to defeat, the nations you need to defeat. So that's the unique system for the Northern Dúnedain. It's not a script or anything like that, it just purely means that once you get outside of your region, you'll be able to train all the local units, and then you'll be able to train a spattering of units from the places that you've either conquered or freed. So it's very, very cool. I like it a lot. Now, map changes. What map changes have there been since the last video to this video? Well, there haven't been too many, save for Bari Donionak in the old video used to cover this whole region, but now Fuirost and Gobadrine have both been added. So both of those are new regions since the last one, which allows for a lot more fighting up here between Ered Luin and Angmar. Additionally, there was another village here called Pit Karanta, and that has been taken away. So Raskiaven just now covers this whole northern area. And yes, I am well aware that Raskiaven means brown boat in Finnish. I have no idea why the original the Third Age team decided to call it Raskiaven, but they did. And it means brown boat in Finnish, and I've been told about 1 million times. So, good to know. Other map changes are Bree has got quite a sizable amount of forts surrounding it now. So there are 5 forts in the Breeland region, so you can go and, if you, doesn't really help you as the Northern Dúnedain, but it's just something to keep an eye out for. The Angmar might take 1 or 2. I think that is about it. That's the major changes to the map since the last one. As I say, Fenestrianen is now a village. That's a major change. Oh, and Anon and Arod, of course. Anon and Arod didn't exist in the last faction overview for the Northern Dúnedain. That has since been added. Likewise, Dol Bryn didn't exist in the last faction overview. So both of those are new regions, ripe for the taking from the Misty Mountains. And those are the major key changes to the map. So finally, tips and difficulty. Well, the Northern Dúnedain did used to be one of the hardest factions to play as. And we have buffed Angmar quite considerably, but the problem is there's just too many forces of good in this region. Now, they are still one of the harder factions, and people who aren't too great at the game may struggle as the Northern Dúnedain, because you do get attacked from all sides fairly quickly. Now that Fenestrianen is also a village, that adds a bit more difficulty to it. But I wouldn't say it's the hardest. As we all know, Angmar is the hardest faction to play as. Regardless of whether or not you find Angmar easy, it is still the hardest faction to play as. And if we take Angmar as a bar, then the Northern Dúnedain are close up there. They're certainly in the top 5 of the hardest factions. But their troops are so powerful, that it can be quite easy to win outrageous victories. Really outrageous victories. The troops' power, though, is offset by, as I said, that there's incredible restrictions on the recruitment of the Northern Dúnedain. And also, not only can they only be trained in certain areas of Eriador, they also cannot be trained very often. One unit of Dúnedain Rangers, and then you might be waiting something like 25 turns before you can train them again. So it is quite a tricky campaign. But so the tips that I would say are, first and foremost, try and get both Fornost and Fornost and Anuminas, sorry. Easily try and buckle down both of those. And I would suggest going for Matrice straight out of the bat. If possible as well, try and get Argond and Keloniak. Try and bottle Dunland in. Another potential tip with Dunland, which is actually very, very effective and has worked for me in the past numerous times, is to run straight for Northern Tharbad and take that. Stop them crossing the river altogether, because remember that if they don't cross here at the Tharbad, the next crossing is just over here, and then they've got to come north, they've got to cross there, and then cross there past Keloniak, and then come down again and cross there. So it's quite a way around to get to Tharbad. The other crossing is, of course, held by Londare, which is owned by Enid White. There's a crossing between Siduri and Londare. So if you can take Northern Tharbad, you basically stop Dunland invading the north. Now, Enid Wythe will invade the north, but they don't particularly dislike you. They dislike Bree. They're not too bothered about you, so they might not go to war with you, so it's not too bad if you get them on the northern side of the Grey Flood. So the best thing with the Northern Dúnedain really is secure Anuminas and Fornost. Try and get Tharbad as fast as possible, maybe with Aragorn and Halbarad together. And if possible, try and rush Angmar. Because if Angmar are allowed to build up momentum, they can be a real threat, because the dwarves will eventually handle Angmar on their own, but the dwarves take bloody ages to get their act together and get across northern Eriador. So if you can try and rush Angmar and just bottleneck them, try and shut them down early, then you're alright. I should also just mention that the Misty Mountains aren't too much of a threat. They're so concerned with Imladris knocking on their door left, right and centre, and of course the constant warfare with the Anduin, that they tend to leave the Northern Dúnedain alone, so you might not actually ever have to fight them. Now, they often do send one or two little probing attacks on Fenestrianen, but nothing more. They're not really a major enemy for you. The Misty Mountains are quite easy pickings if you're in a reasonably peaceful situation, so do just bear that in mind. So that's everything about the campaign for the Northern Dúnedain, and I will see you in the battle section. Welcome to the battle side of the video. Now, units that I did not put in the list for this battle, and sorry, I've already pressed start, so there's not going to be any background music, which is annoying, but it won't be very long. So it matters not. But I didn't put in the Minas Ithil Guardians because even though they're classed as a Northern Dúnedain basic available unit, they are actually part of the beacon system. And if I tried to include every unit that's available to the Northern Dúnedain under the beacon system, we would have to do this like 3 times. You basically get thousands of units. It's outrageous. So this is the Northern Dúnedain lineup. In this first section here, these 2 rows, these are all available before the barracks event. But I've separated them off because this second row is actually really post-barracks event units that you can just train earlier. Now, another unit like that is the Tharbad Royal Guard, but normally you don't actually get these until after the barracks event anyway, because it takes a little while to get them and then to rebuild the bridge and then to do everything you need. But they are available actually straight away if you do everything that needs to be done for them. So these are the before the barracks event and these are after. Again, split into your mainline post-barracks event units and then your elite units. There aren't really any Ubers because the whole roster of the Northern Dúnedain is better than it should be. So let's start with the melee. So first of all, in your before the barracks event, you've got these three. Now the lumbermen are a shock unit. There's their stats there. You can have a read and pause these as I say at will. Lumbermen come from any region that is grassland or forest. You can't train them in mountains or in deserts. So they're restricted because of that. The local militia can only be trained outside of your starting domain. So you can't actually train these in anywhere where you can train Dúnedain. You can't train local militia. And that's true of any of the 4 militia units. There's local militia, militia archers, militia captains, and then militia mounted captains, sorry. So there are only 4 militia units. And they're all, you can't train any of them wherever you can train Dúnedain. But anyway, back to the local militia. So those are your local militia. Reasonably good stats. As I say, they can hold up quite nicely on their own. There's their stats there. They do have a visual upgrade when they upgrade, but it's really minor. This green bit underneath their brown tabards goes to chainmail. That's it. That's the only change. It's very, very minor. You might not even notice it. And lastly, you also get the Cardland Sentinels. Now, the Cardland Sentinels are only available in Cardland. If you're unsure where Cardland is, just look at a map, and you'll then get an idea of where you should be able to train these. And the Cardland Sentinels are quite good, actually. They're a good early tier unit. Now, if you own Cardland, these are quite readily available, actually. So they do form quite a large part of your starting armies. So those are your first line of melee. Now, your first line of archers are the archer version of the lumbermen, the woodland hunters. And it's of special note are the woodland hunters, because their missile attack is outrageous. Their missile attack is 5. Now, that may not sound like much, but in terms of the way that we've done the stats, that's astronomical. Like, the best archers in the game, I think, are the Hinidauer. Well, they are the best archers in the game, and I think their stat is 9. So the best elven archer in the game does 9 missile damage, and these woodland hunters only do 4 less than that. A normal human ranger, such as the Dúnedain, do 6. So the woodland hunters are really good archers, but they're abysmal at everything else. They're really abysmal. They're easily your worst unit if they didn't have their bows. Their melee is only 2, and their defense is 3. They just die like kindling to a strong forest fire should they come in contact with the enemy in melee. And even if they get shot at, they've got no defense from anything. They are an ultimate glass cannon unit, a really high attack damage with their bows, but nothing else. Their stats and morale are poor as well, so they really are an interesting little unit. And really, they're a Breland unit that you just are allowed to use. And also, you get the local archers. So they're slightly better. Their defense is up there at 9, 3 times better than the hunters. But their melee is still pretty poor, and their archery is pretty poor. So they can hold a line a bit better, but they don't do as much damage as the woodland hunters. And then finally, on the cavalry side, you've got the Cardland Riders, who are over here. They are just a good early tier cavalry unit. There's their stats again, and there's their bits and pieces there. Requires Cardland region. And you also get the Dúnedain Scouts, an early game horse archer unit who have that horde mode. And there's their stats there. Again, reasonably good. The Dúnedain are better than average across the board at everything they do. If we take Gondor as the average, which I think we do, it's either Gondor or Dale or someone like that was the faction that I used to balance every other faction. I can't remember which one it was so long ago. But the Dúnedain are slightly better at each tier than the average. So they are a formidable force, but as I say, they're just very rare. Now, if the unit's name is Dúnedain something, then it will require a Dúnedain region. If its name is Arthedain something, like the 3 Arthedain units, then it will require an Arthedain region. And if it's Cardland something, like the 3 Cardland units, then it will require Cardland. So it's all there in the names. Right, in the next tier then, so you can get these before the barracks event, but really they're kind of second tier. First of all, Dúnedain Rangers, goes without saying. They are the Dúnedain's flagship unit. They are the unit everyone thinks of when they think of the Dúnedain, and they're the Rangers. And they're arguably the best human Rangers in the game. They're really, really good. They really are outrageously good. Use them as much as you can. They have a very cheap upkeep of 150, and you can get at least 1 from each of your regions pretty much straight away before it then takes like 30 turns to train another one. So try and get as many as you can early on. Their melee is good, their missile is good, their defense is good. They're just good early game units. Also, the Cardland Archers, who arguably could have come in the front line because their stats are basically the same as the Militia Archers, but just 1 better in each place and slightly better down here. But I've popped them in at the second one just to give a second one there. So there's the Cardinal Archers. Now, as I say, there's only one unit in this entire roster that's actually new, and one unit that has been edited since the last overview, which is why I'm just burning through this. If you want really detailed info about these, watch the other overview and head to the battle section at the end of it. So, in the melee, in the next tier, you've got Dúnedain Wardens and Dúnedain Blade Masters. Now, the Wardens, I think, are actually new since the last one as well, possibly. But the Wardens are a defensive unit. Sword, shield, and spear. As you can see, there's their spear and there's their shield. So, very good defensive unit in the early game. Again, if you can train those, do, because they'll help you against the wargs no end. Additionally, you get the Blade Masters, another very famous Dúnedain unit that comes all the way back from the original Third Age. A unit that's not been changed at all. The Blade Masters are just outrageous shock troops. Really, really good shock troops. But their defense is a bit... As with all shock troops, their defense isn't as good as their attack might suggest. And that's just the way of all shock troopers. But because the Dúnedain are better at everything than everyone else, than all the other humans, their defense is still really good for their tier. But they come before the barracks event and are excellent shock troops. And finally, before the barracks event, are the Dúnedain Cavalry. A very, very good cavalry unit, like a really good cavalry unit. You should really have try and train all the Dúnedain units. Then go for Cardlan, then go for local, and if you've got nothing else, then get Lumbermen and Woodland Hunters. But if you can, you want your army to be Dúnedain everything, because the Dúnedain are really good. So then after the barracks event kicks in and we come to the next tier. Well, let's start with the only really, truly AOR unit that you actually have. And by that I mean it's only available in one place. And that is the Tharbad Royal Guard. Now, as the image would suggest, the Tharbad Royal Guard do change their visual appearance when you upgrade them at a blacksmith. So if you upgrade them, they then get the armor. Now, they're just really good pikemen. They're available in northern and southern Tharbad, but only in those two places, and you have to rebuild the bridge at Tharbad to get to them. But they are pretty damn good. Pikemen are always very good because of the animation that the boss level animation that they get. So their attack is normally lower than you might imagine, but when you see them in battle, you'll realise why it gets lowered, because they are powerhouses. And there's the stats of the Tharbad Royal Guard. Very good pike unit, and the only pike unit the Northern Dúnedain actually get. You're not really that great against cavalry, which is why wargs are really your only enemy, which is why Dúnedain Wardens are very key in the early game. Because if Angmar do go for wargs, you are really screwed unless you can deal with them with, say, your Dúnedain scouts or your superior archers. But if your archers can't stop the wargs, you're in trouble. But after the barracks event as well, and this unit coming only from Arthedain, which is the 3 or possibly 4 units to the north of Fornost, including Fornost. So Fornost, Numinas, Barketa, and possibly Bari Donionach, are the Arthedain Men-at-Arms. Now this is another unit that, as I say, has been changed. These used to be a cavalry unit. They were called Arthedain Knights. But we decided that there were far too many cavalry units in their roster already, and they didn't really have a place. So instead, we dismounted them, and that's literally it. We took the horse away, popped them on the floor, and they pretty much kept their stats. But they are now the Arthedain Men-at-Arms, although the A should be capitalised. That's a pain. I'll change that. And there's their stats there. But as I say, they require Arthedain. Or possibly, actually, from the description, I'll have to double check that. I don't know if I'm right or it's right. They might be available everywhere, and they just have the Arthedain name. In fact, I think they are. It says something in their description about taking the Arthedain name and... Yeah, although these men now inhabit all of Eriador. Yeah, so they're actually available everywhere. They just have the Arthedain name. It's the 2 Ubers that are only available in Arthedain. So, those are your melee. In the archer level, these are the unit that you can train everywhere except for Dúnedain regions, and they are your militia captains. Now, they're not particularly great. Their stats are arguably worse than the Dúnedain Rangers, and that's why. That's the point. They're trained from the local people of the lands that you conquer. They're trained from farmers, villagers, people like that, and the captains are the ones that command those beneath them. And that is what they look like in battle. Pretty nice. They have the Arnorian look, which lots of people have asked for many, many times. And there's their stats there. And finally, in the cavalry section before the elites are the mounted captains. So again, available everywhere. Again, they have the Arnorian look. I'm not sure. I don't think these ones get a visual upgrade when you upgrade them. I don't think they do. But there's their stats. They're just average cavalry, but they're available everywhere. So in the late game, outside of your homeland, those 2 militia units form the bulk of your army because they're available everywhere, whereas everything else is restricted. So finally, or penultimately, we come to the Ubers, the elites. And we'll start in the middle with the Arthedain Knights. The Arthedain Knights are outrageous. They are up there as some of the best human infantry in the game. Their armor level is going on for Dwarven. Their attack is 11, which is shock troop level. They're really good. They are really, really good. And they do require an Arthedain region. So they're really hard to get. And they... if your target is Mordor, which it should be because that's a victory condition, these guys are going to be walking from almost the entire opposite side of the map. Arthedain is about as far away from Mordor as you can get without going to the Blue Mountains. So it's quite a slog. But they're really good. Their morale is locked as well. They're just really outrageous troops. If you can get them, do. They're always worth the money. And similarly, their mounted counterpart, the Arthedain Royal Guard, are just as good. And you'll get to know the Arthedain Royal Guard quite nicely, because if Gandalf the Grey dies, Gandalf the White will arise, and his bodyguard are the Arthedain Royal Guard. That's something I didn't mention in the script section, wasn't it? Gandalf the Grey comes to the Northern Dúnedain about 20 to 30 turns in, something like that. He spawns at Fenestrionen. And the original Gandalf the Grey has Dúnedain Cavalry as his bodyguard, and then if he dies, he comes back as the White, and he has the Royal Guard. And they're really good. Again, they're up there, some of the best cavalry in the game for the human factions. They're easily comparable to Knights of the Silver Swan and Lok in Asurim of Rhûn. But again, they require an Arthedain region, and their morale is actually better than the Knights, which is interesting. Both of them are locked, but the Knights of the Royal Guard, the morale of the Royal Guard is better. And then finally, the brand new unit. So let's have a look at this one a bit more in depth. The Dúnedain Steel Bowmen. These are essentially a ranger unit, like a top tier ranger unit. So they follow the ranger kind of stats. They're good at hiding. They sharpen stakes. The defense isn't that great, but it's still pretty good for their tier. And their melee is a shock trooper level melee. That's an outrageous melee of 14 attack. So they're really aggressive, but they don't have the defense that the Arthedain Knights do to back up that high attack. But they're just really good. And their missile is 8. So as I say, if the Hini Dower are firing at a 9, then these are the second best, and they're not even elves. That shows you the prowess of the Númenórean steel bow. Now, if you're unsure about the steel bow, it is a unique feature that the Númenóreans created, and the orcs were so afraid of this bow that in the battle where they kill Isildur, the Battle of the Gladden Fields, or the Disaster of the Gladden Fields as it's called, the steel bowmen kill hundreds of orcs. They kill an outrageous number of orcs for the number of them that there are, and the orcs are said to be so afraid of their bows that they are reticent to even attack them at first. And the steel bows are just really famous. They're really famous in Middle-earth, and that's the reason why these guys are so good. And it talks a little bit about the bow in the quite lengthy description. But these are available in only a few places, and I've written them all out, actually, although I've spelt Druinen wrong. But Fenestrionen, Fornost, Anuminas, Amunsul, Tharbad, which is north and south, Orthanc, Carndum, Edoras, Minas Tirith, Minas Ithil, Dol Amroth, Umbar, Barad-dûr, the Black Gate, or Lond Dar. All of those places you can train these guys, and only those places. But as you can see, they don't have locked morale, so they won't fight forever, but their morale is still excellent, which is very, very good. They have 32 missiles, which is very good, and their range is 230 meters. That's outrageous. The Hini Dower are like 250, 260, something like that. It's really good. And their accuracy is exceptional. They are really powerful. So Halbarad, who has these as a unique bodyguard, he is going to be key to your battle plans in the beginning. So those are the steel bowmen. And they look pretty good, courtesy of Hummingbird and editing the Grey Company, I believe, to be on foot and using those. And then finally, the Dúnedain Bodyguard unit. The only Dúnedain unit, save for the Rangers and the Cardellani, who can hide anywhere. They're small in number, but very powerful. Now, you'll notice that it says effective against armor. I don't think it does with the steel bowmen. No. And that effective against armor applies to their bows, not... and their axes, sorry. So both their archery and their melee is armor piercing. So the Dúnedain bodyguards are formidable. Really, really strong. They can't run away either, so keep that in mind. That with bodyguards, that's normally a negative rather than a positive. It means your bodyguard will never run away unless you tell him to. So if you fight a battle where you're out of movement points, your bodyguard is going to die. There's no two ways about it. So you know when you've moved an army too much, it can't go anywhere, and then when you fight the battle, you physically can't tell your units to withdraw. The withdraw button is greyed out. But if you're fighting in that scenario and you want to withdraw, your bodyguard and your general is going to die, because they never run away. So it can be a little bit of a double-bladed sword, or double-edged sword, whatever they call it when the sword can hurt you back. But otherwise, they're really good units. Good, strong defense, high melee of 7, add into the armor piercing, that kind of makes that 14. And their missile is 8 again. So they use the steel bow that the steel bowmen use, which is why they have the same archery stat. So very, very good. So that is the Dúnedain roster, and that doesn't take into account the literally 40 or 50 something extra units you get through the Beacon of Hope system. It really is crazy. And they're just a really, really good faction. A really good faction. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the Northern Dúnedain, and I'm sure you will as well. Now, while the battle goes ahead, the Balrog's part of this battle, everyone, by the way, as you can see there. So you can train him in custom battles, apparently. But as the battle goes ahead, I did just want to say something that gets asked a lot, and so much that I put up a little notice about it on Total War Center, some of you may have seen, and on ModDB. For the Northern Dúnedain cannot reforge Arnor. You cannot reforge Arnor in Divide and Conquer at all. We removed that feature completely. So if you're hoping to reforge Arnor, it can't be done. Now there are plans way down the line in the future. Oh dear, look at those shots. There are plans to make a reunited kingdom, but if they come to fruition, I really can't say, and I really doubt they ever will. Which is why a lot of the post-barracks event units for the Northern Dúnedain have the Arnorian style. So you needn't restore Arnor to get these Arnorian units.
Only half the enemy force
and that's
remains.
the lengthy thing I'm trying to say there. So I'm flicking through them all now. These are all your Arnorians. And they clearly have they are just the units from Third Age Total War that you got when you reforged Arnor. So I apologise that feature isn't in the game, but you can still get Arnorian inspired units. They are everywhere. So they're free to use. Now, and as you can also hear as well, since 0.5 they've got new voices. And they actually use Arnorian words now. So they call themselves Dúnedain, and they don't because they're militia. That was a wrong click. They call themselves Dúnedain. These ones talk about Arnor. For the blood of Arnor! For the 7 stars! And it's of course all taken from Battle for Middle-earth, so we are ever grateful to the EA, I suppose. And there's the interesting crappy Balrog model. But anyway, that concludes this overview. So I do hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you've learned something. You've learned a bit about the Steel Bowman. And of course, now the video link to the old one should be coming on screen. If not, it's in the description. But if you've got any comments or feedback, pop them in the comments below. And until we speak again, dear friends, Navaar and Aden Peramad Melunin, and farewell.